Hello everyone, my name is Nate McEwen. I am an architectural graduate student at Iowa State University, graduating in 2018, and I am currently doing a tutorial on Rhino for architecture students. Rhino is a modeling program similar to SketchUp, but with a lot more capabilities that architecture students could utilize. So first and foremost, this video is for architecture students. And it is a series of videos which will explain the basics of the modeling program. These videos will be covering categories of interface and drawing basics, and we will be modeling after the Serpentine Pavilions, which will feature a series of 4 different modules, each focusing on categories of curves, surfaces, solids, and components unique to Rhino, and how to model with these components. And these are small enough constructions that we can actually practice effectively and efficiently and finish them in a relatively short time. And so architecture students watching this can have little to no experience doing this, and this is mostly meant as a sort of introductory video to get you into the basics of the program and get you some of the goals are to give you the basic crash course on the program, spark interest to keep learning Rhino, and make you self-driven to keep learning it throughout your education. And we want you to be able to perform basic modeling tasks, retain the knowledge, and also build confidence in the program. And we will learn today how to effectively and efficiently utilize the program, different strategies for modeling and when to use them in Rhino. And this will involve knowledge from overarching concepts about the program as a whole, and also task-specific knowledge, which will require fixing problems and how to solve them and what type of modeling to use when, depending on the task trying to be accomplished. And so we will be modeling from existing constructions to actually give us a little bit of a reference for what we are doing and what the direction of our modeling will be. So this video will show the basics, which I will run through, and then we'll also be showing text on the screen to let you know when and where to, what the commands are, or what the sort of highlight of the conversation is at that time. So we will run through the basics real quick. So here's a little list I put together of things to cover. And so after reviewing this, you should have the basic knowledge on how to, what the interface is, where to find stuff that you need, and how to navigate through it, and some of the, well, mostly interface and navigational basics. So the first thing on our list is departments, which are up here at the very top. So as you can see, there's things that are pretty similar, familiar, edit, view, and then we run into the Rhino specific departments, curves, surfaces, solids. And so curves are anything that requires two-dimensional drawing, lines, polylines, which when you draw them, they all link together, rectangles, circles, and things of that nature. Surfaces, which you can create planes, you can create different sort of surfaces based on the commands that they have here, and we will cover some of those. Solids, which actually are creating solids like boxes, spheres, pyramids, pipes, and more than that as well, and you can create more specific solids as well. The ribbon menu, so these are the departments up here, and the ribbon menu is actually what you see where my cursor is scrolling now. And so these involve a lot of different, some are similar to the departments, but they essentially are where you can have a visual of where to find commands and how to use them. And we will cover some of those as well. Cplanes. Click the front one. Cplanes are actually what you see in the background, this large grid. This is essentially when you draw, everything snaps to the C-plane, and essentially acts as like a ground plane, if you will. Anything you draw will immediately pop up on that ground plane, unless you tell it otherwise. Set view has a series of different buttons you can click to actually find different views. Here's a top view that we're in now. If we click a bottom view, you can see the text is just reversed here, so that means we're looking at it from the bottom. We can go back up here to the top. And then we have other views, front, right, left, and so we can't see anything because right now I have showing on the screen is text, and otherwise you could see stuff. So if we just turn on some of our other drawings, you can actually see other things pop up here, and so we can actually start to see, look at it from the underside and the top side, and different views. Here's perspective. You can actually begin to see how those take effect. And so those are very useful for navigation. And similar to the set views, we can actually do viewport layout. And one great thing about Rhino is you can model in different layouts, or you can have them up at the same time. So right here, if I were to turn that back on, could actually see and model in the same space, so we can see how what we're doing is affected in other views. So it kind of helps with our perspective of what we're actually doing. And so for right now, we'll just look at the top view, and I'll turn off the other modules. Right now, we're going to focus on my little list here, so we can run through the basics. And so display is another tab up here. And so essentially what this does is it actually gives us different ways to look at our model. So I'll go ahead and keep turning on our first module here, which I will jump into in the next video, but we'll use it for referencing right now. So right now, if I were to go zoom in here, you can see everything is kind of drawn with lines. And right now it's because it's in wireframe mode. So if I actually click on the shaded viewport, you can see some gray tones generated in there. That's because we're actually seeing the shaded version of it. If I go to my perspective view, which is down here, there's also different views you can create. If you want to keep clicking to them and not have to keep clicking back to the set view, we can actually go to our perspective view right here. So right now we're in shaded view. Perspective is default shaded view, but let's go ahead and click on wireframe mode. See, now everything is just generated to wires. So we can actually see through, and we can see the edges of all of our solids here. And so there's other views such as ghosted view, which is a solid and wireframe view combined. Essentially, you can see everything has a little bit of a transparency through it, and you can actually see through the objects themselves. So let's go back to our default shaded view for our perspective, and then I'll go back to my top view, and then I will turn this off. And I might keep turning that on to demonstrate some of these interface basics here. And so I've covered top, front, right perspective views. So that's one great thing about Rhino is you have the ability to go through and model with those views instead of modeling strictly in a perspective view. But it is very easy to quickly toggle through those different views. And so we'll move on to the layers in Rhino. Similar to SketchUp, if you've used that or Photoshop, this program also has layers. Over here on the right hand side, you can actually turn these on and off by clicking on the options, and we can find our layers. So I just turned it off, so now we don't see it, and I'll go ahead and turn it back on. Click on this little gear here, and you can actually click and hold that, and you can drag it around. So essentially these little light bulbs will turn items on and off. See, I'm just clicking right here, and so you can see some text generating over there on the default layer that I have. And you can also lock layers. So let's say I'll turn on my first module here, again, which we'll run into in the next video, and I'll go ahead and lock that. So now I can't actually select it. It's locked. It's there and we can see it, but we can't select it. If I unlock it, I can actually go ahead and select that, and I can move it. And there's this little gumball tool here, which I will explain here in a minute. And you can move that around like so. Just Control Z and undo that. And if I were to lock it again, I can't move it. And so effective layer management is also a crucial part of Rhino, like any program. And so layer management will give you the ability to lock and turn on and off layers as needed. We can turn on, you can create sub layers as well. In order to do that, let's say I have some layers down here. If I want to drag my Module 1 practice layer into this Module 1 curves layer, I can actually click it and I can drag it, and see, it pops up right in there. And if I want to undo that and take it out, there's this button up here that says move up one parent. So right now this layer is a child of this layer right here. If I click on here, it'll actually be removed, and if I click on it again, it'll be completely removed from the Pavilion steps, which is the overarching parent layer for all the example modules I have. And you can minimize and maximize those as well, so it can be nice for quickly and easily organizing your work. The properties panel is over here, and this is also very important for Rhino. When you create items, if I go ahead and create just a little box here to demonstrate, I can actually click on that and I can see all the different properties out here. I can actually give it a name if I want to, call it box 1. And we can actually go ahead and change the layers of this too. So if I change it to the default layer, it changes the default layer and it is actually turned off now. If I turn that layer on, we can see that box pop up. Right? So I'll go ahead and delete that. And so the property box has multiple options from which we can also see. We can see the display color and by layer. So right now my if I put this on the default layer and turn my default layer on, right now my default layer is black, so the display color is also going to be black. But if I change this to a custom color, display color, it actually turns out red. So now everything is red. And then there's different options such as line type, print color. If I were to go ahead and print this, go up to File and go to Print. When it actually prints on paper or to PDF, this color could be different from the display color. Right now my print color is going to be by layer, and the layer color is black. So that means that this, when I print it, is actually going to come out black. So there are different ways to manage what you're modeling, what you see in modeling to make it easier to see, but when it actually prints out, it could be a default by layer color. Right? And so those are the main property categories to know, that you can change the layer, and colors can be set to their layer or they can be a custom color as well. So there's the help button as well. The help button is useful because you can actually, if you ever have questions on what to do, what you want to do, there are all kinds of different help categories you can click on. So let's say we want to create curves, surfaces, and solids here. You can draw curves and lines, and it'll actually give you different commands you can do, and it'll tell you a little description of what you want to do. So if you're ever in a question of what you want to do or what you need to draw, or different ways to edit your geometry, you can go to this little help tab down here. Again, go to the little gear here in the corner, and you can click on this little help layer and turn it on. I'm just going to click over here and get out of that. And so there are different ways which they will give you different commands that you can actually use to edit, and it'll give you little descriptions as well. So this is really great, especially for beginners, to begin to learn and explore all the different sorts of commands that Rhino has. And also, if you ever get lost or need to know how to do something, this usually has a good place to start. And so we've covered display, ghosted, wireframe, and shader views. The name view panel, this is also useful. What you can do, you can actually save views. So if I go to my perspective view, I have my box here. And let's say that I really like this axonometric view here. I can actually go into my view here, and I can save that view. So I'll call it box axon, right? And so let's say that I go somewhere and I actually lose my view completely, and I want to get back to that view. I can just go over to my named views panel. Again, over here in the gears, named views, click on that, double click on that, and it'll take you right back to where you want to go. So this could be nice if you want to have an overarching view that you always want to be able to get back to really quickly. You can actually just save it as overarching view. And now I have that, so if I ever get in here and I want to quickly zoom back out, I can just double click on that view and I'm back out in the open. So let's go back to our top view. And the next part is scaling, 1D and 2D. So scaling in Rhino works a little bit differently from programs such as SketchUp. So let's say I actually want to, if I go down here and click on my tab, if I want to scale this, I can actually type in. So, oh, and I should mention this. There are different ways to put in commands. Here, it's similar to AutoCAD in the fact that you can actually type a command in. In CAD, you can type anywhere in space, but in Rhino, you actually have to go to this command line, and you can type in commands. So let's say, since I'm on the category of scaling, I'll type in scale, and sometimes Rhino, every time, Rhino will actually auto-generate commands for you, and it'll ask you, what do you want to do? So right now I'm going to pick the general scale. I'll pick the first one, and it'll always give you, when you click on different commands, it'll actually give you instructions on how to carry out the command. So always pay attention to what it's asking you for. So right now, for my scale command, it's asking me for an origin point. I'm going to click this corner. You can type in a scale factor. So if I put in 2, it'll actually just multiply it by 2. Or you can pick the first reference point. So let's say this is my base, and I click this. I can actually manually scale it. Right? Looks like my I can't go ortho because I don't have my ortho on. So I'll click on my ortho and grid snap, and we can actually just give that a scale such as that. So when I scale a regular, it scales in all directions. Right? So there is my actual box now. So I'll Control Z and undo that. Let's say I want to scale in just one direction. I don't want the height to increase, but I actually just want it to get much longer, right? So again, it's asking me for an origin point, and it's asking you for a scale factor or your first reference point. Since it's a scale 1D, it's a little more critical, I think, to do a first reference point. So I'll click here, and then essentially it just pushes it, right? You can push it out to there, and there you have your scaled 1D object. And if you do scale 2D, again, pick your origin point. You'll select your first scale factor, and it will scale it proportionately to the current. So you can actually pick the direction you want to do, so it won't get any taller, right? Regular scale is three-dimensional. It scales in every direction. Scale 1D scales it in one direction. Scale 2D scales it in two directions. So I can make this smaller proportionally, right? So now we'll move on to the options and units. And so this is kind of something that needs to be addressed whenever using a new project. If you open a new project, you should always click on options first. And then you can go into setting very basic parameters such as your units. You can set if you want to work in inches or the metric system, and you can select what your default unit will be. You can set things such as the grid. The grid is actually, if you see in the background, this kind of checkered sort of grid, that is your grid. And when you have your grid snap on, you can actually very cleanly, neatly, and precisely actually move something according to the units you have in the background. You can set things like the grid line count. You can do minor grid for every couple units. You can do major grids. And so the major grids are the darker ones that you see. The minor grids are the smaller ones in between. And there are multiple things you can run through. You can run through how you want your appearance to be. You can actually change the colors of your display and such, which can be useful if you like custom settings. But for right now, the units and the grid are two of the most important Rhino options that you should always have ready when you set. You should always have those set when you start a new project. So grouping objects. Grouping objects are also a critical thing to know how to do in Rhino. So I'm going to make another box, and I just clicked on my perspective view to go into perspective. And so let's say I want to make a copy of that box. And so for this, again, if you just start typing, it will actually automatically start generating here in the corner. And copy is a command for Rhino. It sounds like a pretty basic command, right? So I'm just going to copy. I'll copy 3 of these. And so I want to stop copying, so I'll just click enter. Or you can click escape, and that will also get you out of a command. So I have these 3 objects. I'm just going to click and drag around all of them. And to group objects, you simply just type in group. So now, when I click on one of them, it groups all of them together. And I can use the gumball tool to actually move it around in the 3 axis directions, which are highlighted in different colors. If I want to ungroup them, I can simply type in ungroup. And now they're not grouped anymore. And you can actually tell if they're grouped or not by when you click on it and you see the properties. It'll usually tell you if there are grouped items in this particular selection you have made. So we've covered grouping objects. Now let's look at blocks. Blocks, if you are familiar with SketchUp, are like components. Essentially, you can create objects so that if you change one of them, you will be able to change all of them. So let's use our little group of boxes here, and I'll ungroup those. And I will actually delete the others, and I will click on block. So it'll ask me for a base point, and I will just name this box block. And now I will actually copy this block a couple of times so we can see how doing it once can affect it. Just click enter to get out of there, right? So now we have named our block, and let's say that we find out that we actually want this box to be much bigger. What we can do is we can actually explode, and let's say we want to scale 1D. Let's pick our origin point, let's pick our second point, and we'll scale it like that. So now what we can do is type in block again, which is the command, and I'll select our base point. And here you can actually go to the drop down and you can click on the block that we made. So I will do box block there. I'll click OK, and it'll ask you, it'll tell you that it already exists, and it'll ask if you want to replace it. So then you click yes, and see, all of them auto-generate as well. Let's go into our perspective view. Actually, I should click on that. So we'll click on our overarching view, and I'll zoom in, and as you can see, they all auto-generated from before. If I Control Z, you can actually see what it was before. I'll just go ahead and click on Edit and Redo. Edit, Redo. And now all of these blocks have been changed. So you can use blocks similar to components in SketchUp, or if you have to make a lot of something that you know could possibly change down the road, you can make them into a block, and then you'll have the ability to change them all at the same time. And finally, there are other modeling options which are very helpful and familiar to know when actually navigating your drawing experience. So these are all located in examples of different tabs down here at the bottom. For while you are drawing, there are different options that essentially navigate your cursor and how you draw. So let's say that I go ahead and click on another box. Right now I have my grid snap on, so if I zoom in, you can see that wherever I hover my cursor, it actually snaps to this grid. So remember back when we actually did the options, we can control where our options are in order to we can control where the grid is, and that will automatically generate where our cursor goes. So if I go ahead and click here, it looks like it is making this at 6 inches because I have the minor grids set at 6 inches. And then if I go to my front view, looks like it is overlapping with some other geometry here. I can control in this direction every 6 inches how tall I want it to be. So that's what the grid snap does. Ortho allows you to actually move in just the red direction or the green direction, the x-axis or the y-axis. And so essentially what I can do, if I want to move this around, let me just go back to my top view. I can type in move, and it will only let me move either straight to the left or straight to the right, or straight down or straight up. If I toggle off my ortho, I can move in any direction I want, and it's still snapping to that grid. So if I turn that grid snap off, I can put it wherever I would like. It won't snap to any grid, so the precision is lost, but it gives me the ability to quickly move to other places. If I turn my grid snap back on, however, I can control exactly what grid I want it to snap to. So let's say I want it to snap to this, to the edge of this, and we go over here. Now it's at a precise place where I put it. And so other options such as snaps will actually give you the ability to choose where you want to snap drawing elements. Down here in the corner, we have these different options for snapping. So essentially, if I go ahead and turn all of these off, and let's say I want to actually draw a line leading off of this box. Let's go and actually type in line, as that is one of the options we can do. And it looks like it actually is snapping. Oh, it's snapping to the grid. That's why. If I turn my grid snaps off, I'll actually turn the O snap off, and it won't snap to anything. I had my O snaps on before, so if I go ahead and turn that on, it'll actually begin. I have my midpoints on, so it'll actually try to snap to the midpoint of that. So if I turn on my other points, it'll actually begin to snap to other parts of this box. You can turn ortho and grid snap on, and now we are drawing just in one direction, right? So I just drew a line there, so it only wanted to draw just that. If I do polyline, I can draw more than one line. Okay, so those are the basics of the interface of navigating through the program. And now we will begin by jumping into one of our modules. We'll jump into module 1.